right. Well, welcome, everyone. Hasn't it been just awesome to be, for those of you who've been part of the app already, have you enjoyed that? Yeah, okay, good. 3 people. No, I've really enjoyed it. No, I think it's been a really good process. I think I'm on my smartphone a lot anyway, and so this has given me another thing to do. I'm like, oh man, while I'm on my smartphone, I should just do this. But it's given me a lot to think about. It's given me a lot to process, and we're going to continue talking about that as we move along. We are in week 2 of the Brief series, and last week's big idea was get your heading. Before you can go to somewhere new, you have to know where you're going. You have to get your heading and point in the right direction. And it was a challenge for us. Basically, get your heading was a way of saying, you know, what is God really wanting us to do? It's a chance to hear from God. In fact, in our group time, we had one of those questions that asked, "Have you ever heard from God?" And it challenged us to be honest. And I don't know about you, but in my group, it was really refreshing and encouraging to hear the variety of answers from absolutely to no, I haven't. And some instances and some reasons and some things, and maybe it's an impression or it's a voice, whatever it was. It was cool to have those honest conversations, and that's what Connect groups are all about. And in this series, we're challenging everyone to go to a new place, and new places require bravery. I don't know what your heading is, but for single people, it's a little bit different than for married people. For you married couples, and I'm one, you realize that you have 2 headings in your home, right? Like maybe you both have the same heading, and maybe that's grand. In our house, it's not the case. So like you single people, you have the one heading, and that's going to be challenging enough. I feel like, man, I got dual headings, but they're good. They're going places, and one is just from a financial standpoint, being in sync together, and just being in sync. It's frustrating because at this time you think that I'd be better at sitting down with my wife and creating a budget and like sticking to it, but I'm obviously not past that point yet. So I still need work in this area, and now it's one of ours. And there's another one that mine revolved more around creativity and in writing specifically. And so our headings are moving in the right direction, but it's always calling us to do something new and something different, something that's going to require bravery. And spiritual growth is always going to require bravery. It's always going to be new, and new requires bravery. Doing something new is always scary. And there was a commercial yesterday as I'm watching the NBA playoffs. There's a commercial that comes on, and it was a Quicken Loans commercial. And it was ridiculous because I'm going, how does Quicken Loans like directly feed into my message? And this is how. In their commercial, they go, without fear, we can't be brave. In the middle of their commercial, and I was like, is this really happening right now? And so I quickly wrote it down. I was like, I gotta use that. That's cool. But they go, without fear, we can't be brave. And that really tied into what we were saying last week, that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's that brave people move in spite of the fear. They keep on moving even though they have fear. Adventure is something that we all seek. Everybody seeks adventure. Even the most introverted person seeks adventure. They just want to seek it by themselves. But we all want adventure of some kind. We all kind of seek some newness and things that is going to thrill us. And Jesus called Peter to this adventure. He called Peter to this new place, and he called him to a place that he often calls all of us to, a place of just following him, and really doing something out of the normal, out of the ordinary, and in this case, getting out of the boat and walking on water to him. It was something completely, illogical. It was something completely crazy, but it brought breakthrough. And bravery brings breakthrough. It fuels the new. It brings breakthrough in our lives. It requires bravery. The adventure requires bravery. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the story that I referred to, the walking on the water, but we want to set it up. And this story is told by Matthew. He was one of Jesus' disciples, and he was, ironically enough, at this time of year, he was a tax collector. And he liked to, he dropped everything, and he followed Jesus, and he wrote an account of Jesus' story. And he says this in his story. This is kind of his account. He was there. he says this, immediately after this, and this being the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus had, and that was 5,000 men, so it was more like 15, 20,000 people that they fed with this just minuscule, bread and fishes. It was an amazing miracle that happened. But immediately after this, Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake, while he sent the people home. And after sending them home, he went up on a mountain by himself to pray. Jesus needed to refuel just like every one of us needs refueled, recharged, and he did that through prayer. And we can do that through prayer. And so he did that by sending people away, even the people who were following him, even people closest to him, send them off. I'm going to go by myself. I need some time to refuel. It's been an exhausting time of ministry, and I need to recharge. I'm going to go spend some time in prayer. It says, night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble, far away from the land. For a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. So we talked about last week that the Sea of Galilee is really kind of this giant lake, but it has sea-like effects because there's this cut in the rock and the mountain range there, and the wind just kind of whips through it and creates like this wind tunnel, and the lake has this sea effect, this ocean effect, where the waves just get really high, and the wind just kind of causes just disturbances, and it feels like these people are on open oceans, open waters, and it creates this heavy storm atmosphere and effect, and this is what was happening at this time. And it goes on, it says at about 3 o'clock in the morning, let's just stop right there. That's a little bit too late for me. 3 o'clock. I know some of you are out, 3 o'clock in the morning, like you're just getting, kind of, second wind. But for me, that's like, these guys were night guys. Jesus is off praying. Can you imagine me praying at 3 o'clock in the morning? I'm going to go recharge my batteries. Obviously, his disciples, a lot of them were fishermen, and they'd like to be up in the middle of the night and fishing, so they were used to it. But about 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the water. And when the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. They cried out, "It's a ghost." But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage. I am here." And then Peter called to him, said, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." We all have those moments in our life, right? We all have those moments where we're like, "God, if it's really you, just tell me, or just show up in this atmosphere, or just let this happen." Peter was like, "If it's really you, God, tell me to walk on the water to you." And he goes on, and Jesus says, "Do it. Do it. Yes, come," he said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. And he cried out, "Save me, Lord." Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" And when they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshiped him and said, "You really are the Son of God." And so when Jesus went to pray, he was on a mountain called Mount Arabel. And he's in this kind of region where there's a lot of hills and there's a lot of mountains. And he goes up on this mountain to pray. And he actually can see down into the sea. And he sees the disciples like being tossed around. The boat just being kind of whipped around. The waves, obviously he feels the wind picking up. And he sees them just having trouble. And he goes down there. And he rescues them. He rescues them. And he uses that moment as a teaching moment, as he often does with all of us. Today we're going to talk a little bit about, and here week 2, about our storms. We all have storms in life. We all have internal storms and we all have external storms. And the impact of storms, some of them are obvious, right? They cause damage. They cause, they're dangerous. Sometimes, in fact, definitely internal, but definitely external storms. If they get, hurricanes and typhoons and tornadoes, they create desperation. Internal storms oftentimes cause us to be depressed. But in all storms, they develop fear. That's kind of the first thing. We all have fear when we're in the middle of the storms. And the disciples had fear when they're like rocking the boat. The boat's rocking. They don't know what's going on. They're trying to get the ship right. They're encountering this giant storm, and the wind and the waves developed fear. for the disciples. It's kind of funny every time you can look on you can Google up and you can Google top fears, the list. And right, the top fears are usually like public speaking, death, things like that, spiders, insects of kind of. One thing I saw on a top fear list, it actually topped the list recently, was walking at night down the street. Walking down the street at night. And and this reminded me of something, because Jen asked me one time, she's like, Jason, do you ever get afraid, like just like walking down the street, like maybe at night, or just, this was weeks ago, and I'm like, no, just like walking down the middle, no, not really. And it was a fear for her, and obviously for her it was more of like, as a woman, it just causes me to tense up because I have no idea, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to protect myself, and I don't have that same fear because don't jump me in the middle of the street at night. No, but it just, that fear doesn't envelop me. I don't encounter that fear. But the disciples had this fear and this phobia, and the storm is part of it. But obviously, seeing Jesus walking on the water, thinking that Jesus is a ghost, is part of a fear, right? If you saw a guy walking in the middle of the water, the big lake, and just walking on the water at night, you'd kind of get freaked out a little bit as well. We face internal storms. We face external storms. We face the disciples encountered both of these types of storms. The external storm is very literal. It was a literal storm. Rain, wind, thunder, lightning. It was a literal storm. Their internal one was fear, and it's the same things that we face in our lives. And your internal storm may have fear. We all deal with fear. We all deal with worry or doubt or anxiety in our lives. We deal with shame. That's an internal storm in our life. Like, how are we going to deal with this shame? And it causes us to do things differently because we don't want to experience shame. So we stay away from brave steps or bold steps, because what if we fail? And that's going to feel shameful. We feel internal storms also include things like cynicism or distractions or disengagements, things that can really cause us to not go to the new state, to the new thing. Perfectionism stops us from actually trying something because we don't want to fail. Being right and being safe, that's a big one. Being safe, doubt, pride, confusion, or even the case of pretending to be confused. I know that we do that sometimes. We're like, I don't really know. I don't know what's going on. I just, and we know. We just don't want to even go there. We can pretend to be confused. That can be an internal storm. Telling the truth, doing the right thing, internal storms. What do we do? How do we do it? Anything that ruins our feel of comfort is an internal storm. External storms can be defined. There can be simply things that what people do to you, what people project on you. Circumstances or things that are beyond your control in your life. These are external storms. Disease happens externally a lot of times. Like it just kind of comes upon you. Sure, there's things that we can do to not spread disease, and we can do some things that'll increase our chances of not getting a disease. But oftentimes, people get cancer and they didn't really see that thing coming. Relationships can be external storms. Pressures of life, pressures of work, these create kind of storms in our lives, and we have to manage through the tension of these storms. God uses these storms to get our attention. He uses sometimes the most dramatic things possible, dramatic ways possible, to get us to listen to Him. Sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's tragic, sometimes it's scary. But He uses these as teachable moments in our lives, just like He used that with the disciples in this story, in this instance. There is clarity and there is growth that only comes in the storm. There's clarity and there's growth that only comes in the storm. And so today we're talking about, last week we got our heading. We know where we're going. But we're going to encounter storms. And what do? First, you have to identify your storm. You have to identify your storm. What is that thing that is holding you back from the place that God is calling you to be? What is that thing that's holding you back from the place that God is calling you to? What's between you and your heading? What possible stormy areas include, it can include the world, it can include things that we have in our lives, it can include straight up like evil things. What is the thing that's between you and your heading? This week in our individual challenges and within the app and within the Connect groups and things like that, and even today, this morning, I want to challenge you to consider your storm and ask God ask where God is calling you to take a brave step in the midst of this storm. You got to know what's between you and your heading. You're going to go through exercises this week that help you articulate the resistance between you and where you're going. But with a strong heading and an anchor in a strong place that's going to keep you grounded, it's going to help you. It's going to help you stay on course. If you trust your heading and if you move and if you resolve to kind of fight through the storm, it's going to help you to get to that place of newness, to get to that place where you're going for, that target area. And it's going to require bravery. And that's kind of what this whole series is about. This is the thing we're going to be focusing on this week. So you got to identify your storm. You got to know what's between you and that new thing. For some of us, it's really going to be internal. It's going to be dealing with some of the things in our life, like doubt and fear, and shame and doing the right thing, and maybe cynicism or distraction or disengagement. Like we got to get connected. Some of us it's going to be more internal. Some of us might be external. We might have some circumstances in our life that just kind of come upon us and come on us that's meant to get you off course. You got to identify your storm. What is that thing that's going to be between you and your heading and where you're going? Secondly, you have to chase your storm. Not chase as in like find the storm, but like chase the storm, like you see the storm in between you and where you're going. You're going to have to like drive with purpose through it. Drive in the direction of the thing that you are pursuing. Don't shy away because of the resistance. Don't shy away. And who better to illustrate chasing the storm than our friends at Storm Chasers? Take a look at this.
It's right on top of us, Joel. We gotta get out of here.
Right on top of us.
Gun it! We gotta get over these trees, Joel.
Go.
It's on the ground! It's coming right at us!
Go. Keep filming.
I can't, it's right here!
You got that?
Yeah, I got it. I'm right on it.
Wow! That thing is a monster.
Here, give it to me.
All right, go.
Bree, get up here.
Power flash, you see that?
All over the place.
Yes! We're back! Oh, Frank! It's you! Run!
Storm Chasers.
All right. Most run, a few chase. I like that line because I think that we can identify with that line. A lot of people, when they see resistance, when they see a storm in their life, they run away. They get out of there. But if you're going to really get past the storms in your life, the internal storms, the external storms that are coming against you, you're going to have to drive through that storm. You're going to drive in the direction of the thing that you're pursuing. And if the storm is right in between you and where you're going, you got to go through that storm. Everything good encounters resistance. If there's a good thing in your life, if there's something that you're driving to, if there's a goal that you're trying to accomplish, you're going to encounter some resistance in your life before you accomplish that goal. And this is what we're talking about, this storm. If you want to get to that good new place in your life, it's going to require courage, it's going to require bravery, but you are going to encounter resistance. Albert Einstein famously said, "The ship is always safest at shore, but that's not what it was built for." The ship is always safest at shore, but that's not what it was built for. Like, we have to get out there, and we have to go through some of these storms in our life. Chasing your storm requires bravery, it requires courage, and sometimes it requires the courage in the field. Sometimes the courage we in the field that we are used to engaging in is easier than when we have to exhibit it in other areas of our life. For instance, a soldier can be very courageous and very brave on the battlefield. But a lot of times, soldiers get tripped up and get short-circuited when they get back home. for a variety of reasons. But some of the reasons is because they don't know what is required here. And the kind of resistance that they're going to face here is different. Similarly, entrepreneurs tend to take great risks and tend to be really brave and courageous in endeavors that help them make money. But they can't do new things that won't lead to making more money or fame. They don't really have that drive in them. Like, what is that new thing? Like, so it's a lot of times the courage that we exhibit in like the area of choice in our life is good, but we lack it in other areas of our life. And we kind of fall back. We have to really assess kind of who we are and what are those internal storms that are really going to be in front of us where we are wanting to go, where we are heading. What is true risk? You know, there's a difference between assessing a risk and taking a risk. There's a difference between assessing it and taking it. Like, it's good to assess a risk, but you have to jump, you have to leap, you have to move forward. And we're going to talk about that here in the next week or two, about actually taking that leap. What does it require for us to actually make that leap, to make that jump? It's fine to assess the risk, but some of us have to take the risk as well. I came across this interview with Mike Rowe. He's famous for Dirty Jobs. He kind of goes to all these different places. And he told a story that he was in the Bering Sea, and he was in this big storm. Take a look at this video.
When this happened with your crew members and you started thinking about this, because obviously you have thought about this, did you start doing things differently? I presume you still try and mitigate your risk as much as you can, don't you?
Well, what happened for me, I was up on the Bering Sea on a crab boat. This is years ago, and I was frightened. We were in 30-foot seas, and we were still working. The crew is out on a stack of crab pots, 30 feet in the air. We're lashing them together. And when you're 30 feet in the air on the deck of a crab boat and you look down, the deck of the boat looks like the top of your shoe when you're standing up, except it's doing this.
Right.
And I'm hanging on, and I just can't even, A, I can't believe I'm up here, B, I can't believe we're working. I go into the wheelhouse, and I say to the captain, "Hello, OSHA?" And he looks at me, and he kind of laughs, and he points out the window, and he says, "Ocean." And I'm like, no, I get it. You're all very brave, and it's dangerous. But seriously, when do we stop working? It's dangerous out there.
Yeah.
And this guy said something to me I'll never forget. You'll never hear it in the lower 48. But he said, "Son, I'm the captain of a crab boat. My job is not to get you home alive. My job is to get you home rich. You want to stay safe? That's on you. Be careful out there." Nobody had ever said that to me. Now, I'm not saying that's a good idea. I'm not saying we should employ that. But to answer your question, what that did to me was cause me to walk around for the rest of the day like this. I made sure everything in the way of safety gear was on right. I took no chances because for the first time ever, the boss told me
That's fascinating.
that my well-being was my responsibility. And I don't think we hear that quite enough. And so when I say safety third, it's such a ridiculous thing to hear that it takes you out of your pattern. At least it did with my crew.
Yeah.
And it was the way we reminded each other that, look, it doesn't matter. Just because you're in compliance doesn't mean you're out of danger.
So Jen loves to say safety first, then fun. And so when I found this video, I was like, oh, see, I got her. Safety third. You know, he has this famous saying like head up, feet down, safety third. And it's interesting when he's talking about being on this ocean and the sea and just the waves just kind of rocking, kind of similar to the story that we're looking at this morning with Jesus and Peter and the disciples. And it's just, what do you do? Safety is an issue. Like fear for our lives is real when you're in an external storm like that. But sometimes we have to, we have to push through. And the captain was like, you know what? We are pushing through this thing, and we're still working regardless. If you want to be saved, that's on you. And sometimes we do the same. Like we run because the storm is too heavy, and we're afraid of the certain whatever it's going to do to us. We're not sure if we can handle it. We're not sure if what's going to happen to us. And sometimes we just got to fight through that and move forward. It's different between assessing the risk and taking the risk. Some of us need to think safety third and move. So some of us probably get stuck in a spot saying, I'm not going to move because I don't feel like it's safe for me to move. And that's okay to a point. But when you're stuck there for a long, long time, you never take new ground, and you can never move to new places. Something's got to change. You actually have to move and take the risk. So you have to chase your storm. You got to identify it, you got to chase it, and thirdly, you have to fix your eyes on the heading during the storm. Fix on your heading during the storm. When we are in a storm, we feel like God is separate from us. We feel like God is distant from us, like he doesn't even hear us when we pray. We feel like, why is this happening to us? We ask questions like, I can't believe this is going on. God, why would you let this even happen to me? I've done good. I've done, why? And it's interesting in this story. I'm not talking about how Jesus went out up on top of Mount Arabel to pray. And he could literally see the disciples struggling in their boat. It's important for us to remember that God sees you in your storm. God sees you in your storm, in the midst of what you're going through. He is there. He's there to rescue you. He's there to see you through. He's there for if you're going to pursue it and chase it and move through that thing. He's there to be right there with you, just like Jesus came down and helped the disciples. And as soon as he used this teachable moment, the wind stopped. The wind stopped. God sees everything that's happening, and he sees you in the midst of those times where you feel like he is so distant and so far away from you. He sees you. He's there. He's mindful of what you're going through. It's easy for us to feel that way, but because we just feel like God's we feel like he's not acting on what's important to us at the moment. God is very, very aware of what's happening to you, but he has a purpose that sometimes doesn't really fit into our time frame, our timetable. When you're in the storm, run to God for shelter and protection. Don't run away. Run to him. Don't run from him. It's how we respond to storms. Paul said it this way. He was talking to a church in the city of Corinth. He said, "We think you ought to know, dear brothers and sisters, about the trouble we went through in the province of Asia. We were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure. And we thought we would never live through it." Have you ever been in something like that where you're just like, man, I don't even know if I can get through this storm in my life? Maybe it was a disease. Maybe it was the loss of a loved one. Maybe it was a crushed relationship. Maybe whatever. We thought we would never live through it. In fact, in their case, we expected to die. But as a result, we stopped relying on ourselves and learned to rely only on God, who raises the dead. That's interesting. As a result, we stopped relying on ourselves and chose and learned to rely only on God, it's a good reason to rely on God. Man, he raises the dead. Even if we die through this, God raises the dead. We talked about that a few weeks ago, right, in Easter? And he did rescue us from mortal danger, it goes on to say. And he will rescue us again. We have placed our confidence in him, and he will continue to rescue us. Bravery is easier when you rely on God because you know and you have confidence that he will continue to rescue you. Bravery is easier when we have that knowledge and that understanding. It doesn't make it easy. It doesn't make it simple. It just makes it easier. It just makes it a little bit more easier to stomach. When something is happening to you, know that God wants to do something in you. When something is happening to you, God wants to do something in you. And so it's important for us to recognize our storms, identify that, drive through in the direction that we are pursuing, chasing our storm, but fixing our eyes on the heading of our storm. Peter had to fix his eyes on Jesus in order to stop sinking. God help me. Jesus help me. He reached down and he helped him. It was when he was focusing on other things, he was distracted, he was disengaged, and he was too concerned with the storms in his life, the pressures, that he began to sink. When something is happening to you, God wants to do something in you. It's amazing the kind of fire and the kind of bravery that Peter would walk in post this for a while. And then he kind of had a relapse, and then he had even more strength. And that happens. In the Old Testament, there was a prophet named Isaiah, and he said this when it came to God. It says, when you walk through the flood or the fire, they won't consume you. It isn't that God says there won't be a fire or flood, but rather that we will be preserved in our circumstances. There will be storms in your life. Maybe you're encountering one right now. But you will be preserved, and God will continue to rescue you. There's a book out there by John Ortberg that says, if you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. It's a good book, but just the title alone says it all, right? If you want to walk on water, you got to get out of the boat. If you're going to do something new, if you're going to do something brave, if you're going to do something that's beyond kind of just the norm, you got to do something. It requires an act of bravery. It requires a bold step. But you're going to have storms in your life, but remember, everything good encounters resistance, and that God will continue to rescue you every time. Every time. Let's pray.